If you go to Nigeria, where we do have a huge population of people with sickle cell disease, the Yorubas, where it's like Abiku, meaning this child doesn't really stay that long. And the Igbos, those in eastern Nigeria, have a folklore about Ogbanje. So these are things that have been there for years, describing children who don't tend to live as long as they should, who become quite unwell, and it's often linked to mysterious reasons why they die. We now know that a majority of this, not everybody, did have sickle cell anemia, most likely, or sickle cell disease, sorry to say, as an explanation for why this occurs. So what exactly is sickle cell? When it became a real thing was probably in 1910, when Dr. Herrick dealt with a medical student from Grenada, a dental student from Grenada, who was always unwell, and then took blood samples from this young man and saw these sickle crescent-shaped cells that are like, oh, somebody subsequently, black, named it eventually as sickle cell disease. But that took them back to thinking, this must be the reason why some of these people have always been yellow-eyed, didn't grow as well, affected every organ function, and they've been coming with pain. So in general, that is sickle cell, and that puts to credence what our Africans have seen before with terms like Ogbanje and Abiku, as we've described. Other parts of African cultures, we have different descriptions, I know the terms for, but that is what it is in essence, sickle cell disease, and it's an inherited problem.
Nigeria has the highest case of sickle cell in the world. A lot of people in Nigeria don't have the knowledge about sickle cell. They are not aware, you understand? In some parts, especially northern Nigeria, where education, the illiteracy is high, they may not be aware of this, unlike some people in southern Nigeria. I'm sure I've never done that statistics, within north and south, but I'm speculating that it will be very high in the north, or especially in people who have lack of education, probably not well educated or not aware. Let me just put the word, they are not aware of it, you understand? They are the people who overlook this thing, they just blindly marry, the gun at the day is always blind. Love is no longer, love the shine eye now.
All right, this is Glasscast Podcast. We're here again. Today, actually, it's a Saturday, and Saturdays are, beautiful day for activities, especially from where we came from. We have weddings. Saturdays are for weddings, and Sundays are for child dedications and naming ceremonies and all that. So I believe most of us have been, out on the weddings and other activities, and you're back home now. And on this note, I want to welcome you to today's episode of Glasscast Podcast. Remember, we bring you the subjects that are very educative, intriguing, mind-blowing. So subjects that get you thinking about today and the future. So I want to introduce my guest and your guest this evening. We have a very special guest in the person of Dr. Nkem Jacob. Doc, you're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Hello.
Thank you. And we have the double Dr. Daniel Awomoku. Doc, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here as well.
Yeah, we call him Double Doc for obvious reasons. He's a forensic scientist. He has a very long CV. He's well educated and well exposed in the topic we are going to discuss today. And I bet you will learn so much from this discussion. Also, Dr. Nkem Jacob, you'll be delighted because it's a blessing that we have him in the studio today. He's a consultant pediatric hematologist. So if you know what this term implies, you would do yourself a favor by bringing your share close. If you are a parent, a dad or a mom, or even if you're a child, come closer. And if you are that person that got married today, that's some of us went to join you in the celebration, or you are about to get married, or you are that young man that is inviting your girlfriend to your house this evening, or you are the lady that is preparing to go and meet your boyfriend this evening. I think it's important that you even come closer. Get your bucket of popcorn and glass or bottle of water, because our topic today is very, very interesting. If you have neighbors around, if you have relatives around, bring them closer because we are going to enjoy our conversation today. Also, remember to share our content. Remember to press that like button, the share button, subscribe, follow our page because we are bringing you even more and more intriguing subjects. Without wasting much of our time, I think we should start with asking Doc, because Doc has a very long resume. And I would want Doc to introduce himself to you. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Henry. It's a real pleasure. That's I wouldn't have even attempted to describe things the way you put them so eloquently. So it's a beautiful day, you said. My name is Nkem Jacob, and it's a pleasure to also be here with yourself, Dan.
Yes.
And in the midst of people who are this enlightened and educated, illumination comes. So it's a beauty. So my name is Nkem Jacob. I trained as a medical doctor in the University of Benin. Subsequently did my pediatric specialization in the University College Hospital in Ibadan to become a pediatrician. I worked for about 2 years back in Nigeria until the call came probably 9 years ago to come across to the UK. And the main idea for that was to continue to develop and train. My interest while being a pediatrician was to do the pediatric hematology. And I just couldn't think of a better way to do that than to actually be in a setting where you develop and actually do it properly. So I'm grateful to have had that opportunity to complete a second training in hematology. And that clusters why this in the CV appeared long. And that was why the journey is long, almost in the way that a doctor here has gone through. So I've worked in the last year or two now as a consultant pediatric hematologist in the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow, where I think I do see a number of children and even those who are older with the topic of your discussion today. So I think it's a keen topic that people need to listen to. It's topical, it's important, and it's a thing we can do. We all do something about, really. It's a pleasure once again.
Oh, thank you, Doc. And I know the double Doc in the house would want to say something as well. You know, his background and his experience that's, relevant to the topic we have.
Well, thank you very much. I don't think I need much introduction because I've been here, some time ago when I discussed about paternity fraud, and when I was also probably here when the other doctor who discussed about
prostate.
So probably your humble Dr. Daniel Owomuku probably has a doctorate degree in biotech and also a second doctorate degree in forensic genetics. So it's just a pleasure that I'm here. That's much I would say. Well trained here across Nigeria, South Africa, United Kingdom. So that's all
I think the brief introduction have given you the spotlight of what our discussion this evening is going to look like. But before I lay bare the main subject of discussion today, I would want Doc to Dr. Nkem here, because we have a house full of docs. So I would want Dr. Nkem here to give us an insight of the job of pediatric hematologist. What is it all about?
That's a very good question. Because the problem with medics is sometimes we throw in so many big fancy terms that blow up people. So it's good to break it down. I like the question, actually. Good. So the word pediatrics there, it's children. So that just keeping it simple. And then hematology, that word rings a bell for itself. For anyone who has some affiliation to medicine, it means blood. So basically, we are seeing children who do have blood-related conditions, one of which is your topic of discussion. It means that we see children with various conditions, whether it is benign, meaning it's not necessarily going to harm them if you don't do anything quickly, or malignant, meaning trouble. But that includes things like cancer in children. Unfortunately, these things happen. Although people always get scared when you say that these things are reality in children. So we do not just provide the medical care as well. We also liaise with other specialties to be able to find solutions to these children. One of those includes stem cell transplantation or cellular therapies for these children, but when it becomes very complicated or extreme. So a diverse range of children with blood conditions, ranging from thalassemia, sickle cell, blood cancers, people who have low blood count for different reasons. Most of these children deserve a lot, and hematology does bring to bear that answers for them.
Well, interesting. I believe, if you are sitting down there, if you don't have your popcorn yet, bring it closer, because you are going to learn a lot this evening. And Doc, you made mention of blood, hematology, blood, and it brings us to the topic we have today, the sickle cell. People call it sickle cell, some people call it sickle cell disease, some call it the sickle cell anemia. There are, different ways that people refer to this particular condition. So, as a specialist in hematology, how do we describe this particular condition called sickle cell?
It's a pleasure once again. I think sickle cell is the main topic of discussion today.
It is, yeah.
And it's a key topic. It's a topic, I think, for anybody listening to the podcast, affects people in various ways. You may not necessarily have a family member within the immediate first generation affected, but you have somebody else, a neighbor next door, somebody who's got a cousin, who's got a child, who's got a young person going through this condition. It's a very good point you've made about sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia. Terminologies matter. We tend to use the word sickle cell disease as a bigger description rather than sickle cell anemia or sickler. So those are terms we tend to avoid as much as possible. And the reason is because these young people or these older people do not bring this upon themselves. We need to find ways that are humane to describe conditions that are lifelong. So sickle cell disease, coming back to what it is quite a long journey, I would say. It's been known in the African or Asian cultures for long that there's a condition that makes people's life expectancy shorter. So I think if you go to the Iwi tribe in Ghana, they'll say in Dwidi, the Fantis, we use words like, they've got descriptions for it. If you go to Nigeria, where we do have a huge population of people with sickle cell disease, the Yorubas, words like Abiku, meaning this child doesn't really stay that long. And the Igbos, those in eastern Nigeria, have a folklore about Ogbanje. So these are things that have been there for years, describing children who don't tend to live as long as they should, who become quite unwell, and it's often linked to mysterious reasons why they die. We now know that a majority of this, not everybody, did have sickle cell anemia, most likely, or sickle cell disease, sorry to say, as an explanation for why this occurs. So what exactly is sickle cell? Sickle just comes from the term itself. Anyone have done a bit of gardening would have seen the sickle instrument used to pluck things off. So it's like a bent shape, a bent tool, a bit twisted. Blood is not supposed to be that way, but in these people, that's the way the blood looks. It's all twisted. That means
like crescent, right?
It's essentially like crescent. And there's a best description. It's like a crescent, half moon or some description. That is not the way cells should look. And then these cells try to navigate the bloodstream and they break down. So you have to come to this disease with compassion. It breaks down, and that happens every day. As we speak, every sufferer with sickle cell disease is going through this as we speak. So that means that they live a lifelong condition related to being anemic. The blood count level will be low because they break down their cells at a steady state. So what is your normal for them? You have to describe a new word, which we call steady state. It means if your normal blood level is so certain number, for them, their normal will be sitting a threshold lower, and that is normal. It's even when it drops further that they run into more troubles because their normal is already lower as a state. So other problems also go with this condition. That's basically, if to put it in a basic term, what happens to patient with sickle cell disease. When it became a real thing was probably in 1910. When Dr. Herrick dealt with a medical student from Grenada, a dental student from Grenada who was always unwell, and then took blood samples from this young man and saw these sickle crescent-shaped cells that Dr. Dan has described. Like, oh, somebody subsequently, Black, named it eventually as sickle cell disease. But that took them back to thinking, this must be the reason why some of these people have always been yellow-eyed, didn't grow as well, affected every organ function, and they've been coming with pain. So in general, that is sickle cell, and that puts to credence what our Africans have seen before with terms like Ogbanje and Abiku, as we described. Other parts of African cultures, we have different descriptions. I may not know the terms for, but that is what it is in essence, sickle cell disease, and it's an inherited problem, which is something we'll come to talking about next.
Yeah, it's something we'll come to talk about. I know you've mentioned about some historical development within the African society, but I know some of us are aware of this condition. Some of us may want to get more insight. Like, what are the signs, the symptoms, apart from being sickly or having yellow eye, or what are the symptoms or signs of this condition?
That's another very excellent question. And it's actually one that speaks to most families day to day because they have a sufferer. They've got somebody who's affected by sickle cell. So sickle cell, if you were to use the medical jargon again, for which I always apologize, medics always throw it in. They use the word multi-systemic. It means every single organ, every single tissue can be affected. But the day-to-day life is the things you described. There's that yellowness of the eyes you tend to see, and that's because the cells are breaking down. The reason why our stools are colored yellow, when you see somebody pass a white stool, you panic because there's no color to that. It's because cells break down, they are excreted in those areas. But in sickle, the red cells are breaking down. Those yellow deposits, you see them in the eyes, and that's what you call jaundice. For those who may identify that word.
Jaundice, yeah.
So those children often look that way, and they often look paler. The prominent facial bones you see around the face is because the body is working overtime to compensate for that loss, that daily breakdown. So you see some heightened facial features, for which people can actually even be stigmatized, which is a shame, because these are things that the young person or the older person wasn't born with. So that's the general look. It means that there are two medical jargons that will come straight back at the audience again now. Acute, that's the things that will happen to them, why they would need to go to a hospital. And then chronic, long-term problems. So what is the acute three things that you worry about for sickle cell? So the acute things are, yes. So before I come to the questions around what are the two common things that could happen, I'll take it a step back and say what causes sickle cell. Then I'll just come back to that question. The cause is the most important thing, to be fair, because sometimes we may have gone in a detour, but the cause is why we are all here, why we're trying to talk about this condition. As you said, it's inherited. So it means that two consenting adults are behind that whole process. Oftentimes for no fault of theirs at all, but it's something that could be remediable, and that's why we talk about this. The sickle gene is carried in your blood cells. 1 in 4 Nigerians, for example, if you're a Nigerian or other parts of Africa, we carry the S gene. We say AS. And it's a word most people are used to. A huge proportion will be AA. And then if you got somebody who's carrying that sickle gene, who's an AS, otherwise wild, normally they'll be wild, they will not be affected. And the reason is because most of their cells will be A. The S carries a small fraction. So they will never know. They live through life with no problems at all. And I suspect for most of us sitting here, if we ask your genotypes, you'll be surprised somebody's got AS. That is perfectly fine. The problem becomes when you have a partner who's also AS. There's a risk. There's a 1 in 4 chance. It means for every pregnancy, there's a 1 in 4 chance that one of those two X's will meet, if you draw the diagram roughly. So that means for every pregnancy, there's always a chance that the childbirth will be sickle cell anemia with an S and S shared on both. There's also a very good chance there'll be AA. There's no doubt because there's an A on both parts, or AS. But you never could tell that chance when it happens. One of the early ways to tell if you do have the ability to diagnose when a woman is pregnant is to take cells from around the fetus that is developing. These are very complicated procedures, not easily accessible for most places. And I think the geneticists...
Yeah, I like to talk about the genetic angle, you understand? Because I thank you very much for your explanation. That's a very, very comprehensive and
good.
Yeah, I love his explanation. I just want to go into the genetic angle, which I'm a professional in. Yeah. You know, everything about sickle cell itself, from the origin, it started from the gene, right? There's what they call mutation, right? There's some people who may not understand what mutation is, but mutation is an alteration in the sequence of the gene. Okay? So the kind of mutation it undergoes what they call point mutation. So in each cell itself has a gene in form of they could come in form of an allele. You understand? And the alleles, like time I explained about paternity fraud, I talked about alleles. That gene, you must get one allele from your mom and one from your father. That's from both parents. You understand? So if the hemoglobin itself, I must surely have hemoglobin A and hemoglobin S. So what happens is like whenever there's a point mutation that occurs in the hemoglobin is like the oxygen carrier of the blood, but there's a gene that transmits that. So the gene that actually does that, if it undergoes, because it's supposed to, during whenever they call, during protein synthesis, this gene actually produce protein is amino acids. So there's one that's called peptide, and there's one called valine. I don't want to go too technical, but the point is that if anyone who's an expert who understands about what they call nitrogenous bases in genes, that's what they call adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. So there's a particular part whereby you're supposed to have thymine there, but the mutation will change it to adenine. So it, instead of producing proline, it will produce valine. And by so doing, it will not alter the sequence of the gene. And whenever it alters it, it's no longer produce the right protein itself. Then it now has a mutation. That mutation on its own, well, the causes of mutation can come from any angle, probably whether it is exposure to ultraviolet ray or any kind of radiation, unless it can also induce mutation. But we don't know where this mutation started, but it's been there for a long time, because as human, we do have errors in gene. So that error itself now actually alter the gene. And once it now alters, instead of it to produce a normal hemoglobin A, which will give you the normal red blood cell with the hemoglobin itself, it will now give you the hemoglobin S. So that will now give you that one with the sickle cell that has lack of hemoglobin, and probably the person will not be able to carry oxygen for a long time. So at that angle, that's the angle. So that usually occurs in chromosome 11 on its own. Probably, we know human beings have about 23 pairs of chromosomes, total 46. You understand? But we discovered that error occurs in chromosome 11 because each chromosome has information it has from chromosome 1 to chromosome 46, thereabouts. So, which will have the X and Y thereabouts. Yeah. So that's just one angle. I got a bit technical, but I hope they understand it. So that's one of the major causes. And once this thing causes this gene, it will now be transmitted from generation to generation. One particular parent will actually have that particular sickle cell gene. And once you have that sickle cell gene, it's at that genetic level that it will manifest. And whenever there's a crossing, probably someone who is normal will have that two pairs of the hemoglobin A, and someone who's a carrier will have one pair of the normal hemoglobin and will have one pair of this sickled cell, the one that is that had a sickle cell. But if you have two of them, that's you become dominant. You understand? For your gene are not expressing both of the hemoglobin S, then that becomes an issue. You now become a sufferer, in terms. But I'm sure I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know the terms they will use, but we just say is that a sickler or a sufferer. But for ethical reasons, I don't know the right word I will use. So I will just keep it like that. So, but whenever you manifest, you become dominant. You have inherited both genes from your father and your mother. That's when that particular person now manifests the disease. So that's just what I want to do.
Well, you would agree with me that this is going to be tough. So, but you don't need to go start looking for your dictionary. What I would say, send us your comment, ask your question in the comment section. Go to the comment section, ask your question about the terms, the medical terms, the professional terms, the jargons that have been used here, and I can assure you that further details will be provided to you. So don't worry if you are hearing too much of these jargons. It's just for us to make sure that things are properly explained. But as much as possible, I would crave the indulgence of the professionals in the house to, as much as possible, consider our viewers and make the grammar a bit palatable in this case. I want to ask a question, Doc. The analysis you gave, remember, what was said earlier is this condition, from my understanding, is caused primarily from two consenting adults who have come into a relationship and decide to have an offspring. So earlier you could not remember why I said earlier that if you are that young man inviting your girlfriend, or if you are that person that just had your wedding today, or if you are that lady who is preparing to go for the weekend away with your boyfriend, I think this subject is something you will pay close attention to. So sit down and listen. Doc, so at what stage does this DNA activities happen? Is it when the baby is being formed, or when the baby is growing? Can you throw more light? Because I believe our followers would want to know more.
gene codes information in every individual. Like me and you here, we all have our own genes. You understand? That codes for information that we transmit to our children to transmit it to our grandchildren. So those hereditary materials is called the gene. You understand? So in that particular gene, and you already have it in you. Okay? It is not like something you're going to form. It's already have it in you, but probably everything is transmitted during reproduction. You understand? To the next generation. Each cell will undergo meiosis. You understand? If for you as an individual, there's what they call cell division, they call mitosis. So it's just for you to grow and expand as a human being. But when it comes to the level that you want to carry your genetic material to the next generation, each cell will undergo what they call meiosis. And that meiosis will now divide the number of chromosomes you have by half. So you're already a diploid organism, so which means you have gene of your mother and your father and you. That makes you a diploid, 2 sets of chromosomes. Then for your child, has to carry 1 set from you. So it now has a haploid cell. So you do not carry that. So the mother needs to give an what we call a haploid chromosome set. You understand? Which for human beings is 23 from the man, 23 from the woman, from the male and the female. So in that particular chromosomes themselves, that 23 chromosomes that the father gives is a particular set. The mother also gives hers. In that particular number, if I, like, for instance, I count chromosome 1 to 2, 1 to 23, or let me say 1 to 22 at the particular angle, because one of them is the sex chromosome, it's either X or Y. So I will look at the autosomal ones, the ones that code for other somatics and all the body cells. That doesn't determine sex. So there's what they call chromosome 11. That is where the information about the sickle cell on its own is coded. You understand? That particular chromosome carries the gene that codes for the protein. You understand? Those proteins themselves will actually code and actually produce the hemoglobin needed. Hemoglobin is the oxygen carrier in the red blood cell. You understand? So it has to, that gene codes it. So if that gene already has that error in it, that mutation in it, probably you will automatically, that error has to be like it's not something that happens in you. You understand? That the mutation didn't happen in you. It happened generations long ago. But the generation, it now becomes part of the gene set of the gene or the genome, and it now transmitted from generation to generation. So if, for instance, let me say, for instance, my mom has AS, that means she's a carrier of the sickle cell gene, and she has one normal gene. So probably one of her parents, father or mother, must have given her that. And if myself, as a practical, let me say my mom, my dad also has a carrier of that gene at AS. You understand? You find that if by probability ratio, you understand, if let me say, if a man who is AS and AS, like A is a normal a carrier, the gene is A, the one that has the hemoglobin A, and also has the hemoglobin S. That is the sickle cell. So that person is carrier. That person will appear normal, all right? Because the other one will become recessive, then the hemoglobin A will become dominant. Are you with me? So if they actually come down, then the probability of you having a normal child, that is someone who has dominant AA, is 25%. Then the probability of you having that particular person who is a carrier is 50%. And the probability of producing offsprings that will have the sickle cell disease is 25%. So it's shared in that formula. So if that, I'm just going back to the question you asked, is where does the gene come from? So it is already in the gene. So if that gene already, if you have that gene, that hemoglobin S gene, this mutation has occurred years back. It's not like it's occurring like in you, maybe, let me say, for instance, you're a normal person, all of a sudden the mutation happens, and next thing is that changes your normal cell to a sickle cell, cell, the gene now alters. No, it's just been there for years back. We don't know when it started, whether it started during the creation or whether, if you go the religious angle, someone would say it's the devil, but I'm not going to play that angle anyway. I'll keep my own thing on the scientific angle. So whatever the alteration, that's a mutation happened. But the most important thing is it has been transmitted from human beings from generation to generation. Now we have this knowledge. It's just to find a way around it, to prevent it or
Good.
probably carrying that.
And just before you jump in here, to summarize what Dr. Dana said, it's a spelling mistake that is described. So it's a small spelling mistake that happened in what your parents passed on, and you already have it. So yours is to say, am I carrying the S chromosome? Am I carrying the S gene? If you're carrying it, you think, as you described for your viewers already, you have to think outside the box. So we don't know why it starts in Africa, why it starts in India. One of the thinking is that it starts there to prevent malaria. The general scientific protocol principle is that you don't want to carry two traits that can be deleterious. So most people, where the S gene sits, if you are AS, people often use that word, you don't tend to have a lot of the malaria traits sitting among those people compared to those who are AA. So the general principle is what they call balanced polymorphism. You don't carry two of those things that are deleterious. So maybe that's why I selected the African community and sat there. It's huge in West Africa. As you go down to South Africa, percentages drop significantly. So, and the cluster, Nigeria has probably 50 to 100,000 children born every year. So this is critical beyond the science we've described with sickle cell disease. And that's come from people who are carriers already has one of the S gene, like an AS. And have not factored that into their next relationship, just to keep it in a simple fashion.
Right. Can I ask a question? Does it mean that the prevalence is because of the malaria, or is it because of they themselves don't know exactly, don't have the knowledge of selective what they call selective mating? Probably if someone knows it, because if genetics comes into
selective mating is in terms of
that's what we're practicing,
like in terms of reproduction.
Okay, you can say selective reproduction, but I would just say selective mating, because if we actually, I'm sure it's very prevalent. Like we've checked the record, found that it's very prevalent in Nigeria. Nigeria has the highest case of sickle cell in the world.
Interesting.
As well as followed by Ghana. Yeah, it's there. If you Google and check it, I think about 20 to 30% of child born actually have sickle cell. I do my own angle. I'll look at it as part of ignorance. People didn't know about it, because it's something you can prevent through selective mating. It can be random mating, because if we're mating randomly, you understand, that means you were, that's what they call random mating, according to what they call Hadewembach's equation. Probably people have to rate randomly. You find that definitely will have that high angle, and it's going to be balanced in that ratio of 25-50% and thereabouts. But if it is something like people start applying selective mating, because I think that a lot of people in Nigeria don't have the knowledge about sickle cell. They are not aware. You understand? I remember my younger sister, she actually, thank God she didn't marry that guy. She dated a guy for like 3 years when they were in the university. They were doing, both of them were both Christian Union. They were doing their stuff. According to her, they were platonic. Everything was intimate, but they didn't do any genotype tests. So all of a sudden, the guy, my sister was AS, me, I'm AA. You understand? I'm not a carrier of the sickle cell, but she's a carrier. But she needed someone who is not a carrier to actually have a child, because there's the probability of her having someone who has sickle cell is 25% in her, and carrier is 50% on that. So it's randomly, it's probably you can have your first, second, fourth child, they'll all be sicklers, they'll have the sickle cell gene. They'll be sufferers, let me use that word. So I would, but the guy himself now ran for sickle cell genotype test, and I found out that he is AS and AS as well. And the guy started telling her that, we've been like this for a long time, that they should pray and God will find way to change the whole thing. And I stepped in that very time. I said that
blood of Jesus will wash it away.
I said I don't believe in that. That God himself has given us knowledge to actually discover these things, for you not to act ignorantly. God will not do that work for you. So if you think that I'm not doubting miracle, but I want the miracle to manifest in you. You are AS, right? I told the guy, go and pray, fast, and change your own genotype first to AA. My sister is not changing hers. Once you become AA, then you can come back and marry her. That's how they're separated. I don't understand. So you find out that now this is because we are lighting people. That's why it happened.
Is it that he didn't pray, or the prayer didn't work?
Honestly, we know that the prayer won't work like that. God doesn't answer that kind of prayer. You understand? There are kind of prayers God answers. God doesn't answer that one. You probably want to tempt the Lord your God. You already know the answer. You just want to tempt him. So you go in there, once you have separate, then be our guest to meet go to the hospital and be taking all your medications to rescue the child, or probably you kind of come down to either bone transplant or you come down to do gene editing. But that is when you have money to do that. But let me don't go the angle. What I'm trying to say is, I think, if, for instance, let me say, there was another family I know that before I even knew about sickle cell, they were 9 in their family and 4 died. Only 5 survived. And I'm relating to what Doc said about people calling it Ogbanje.
Very sad.
And all the red. Yeah, calling Ogbanje. That was exactly what we heard. They said that they were cursed, they had to do this, they keep jumping from one church to the other. And at the end of the day, I don't know why they won't go to the hospital. They just keep jumping from one prayer house to the other. And one day, I don't know what happened, they just decided to go to the hospital, and they said, run genotype test, because they married without doing all these tests. And when they now came back, then I found out that both of them are AS, and all 4 of the children that are sufferers, they all have sickle cell. So, disease, they have sickle cell disease, then the rest could be either carriers or normal. And at the end of the day, that was what happened. So I think in some parts, especially northern Nigeria, where education, the illiteracy is high, they may not be aware of this, unlike some people in southern Nigeria. I'm sure I've never done that statistics to know within north and south, but I'm speculating that it will be very high in the north, or especially in people who have lack of education, probably not well educated or not aware. Let me just put the word, they are not aware of it, you understand? They are the people who overlook this thing. They just blindly marry, The Ghana did law was blind. Love is no longer, love the shine eye now. Understand? That's what I want to say.
Love the shine eye. Doc, I would want you to throw more light on this. Although you have given us a bit of the statistics that within the sub-Saharan Africa, especially within the West Africa, that the prevalence of this condition is quite high. I want to ask, what is the I believe families that are that have children, that have individuals passing through this condition, I could imagine what their daily life and daily routine could be like. And I'm not even talking about the individual who is the sufferer of this situation. I want to ask, based on your professional practice, especially in this part of the world, it looks like it's not something that is common within the white culture or cultural group. Is not something that is predominant in this part of the world. But what are the? I know Dr. Omuku have thrown more, some light on it, but I want you to throw more light on the psychosocial, not psychosocial. I'm not talking about Sigmund Freud here, but the psychosocial implication of this condition on the sufferer and on the immediate family or relatives who look after them.
That's a very, very good question. Yeah, you're spot on. Actually, it's not common here at all. It's unlikely. There's a bit you could say in the Western world would be among the Mediterraneans. For those who have some relation, who know about Italy, Sicily, Cyprus, Greece, we do see a bit of specks of sickle cell traits sitting about, but mainly is African, and lots in Saudi Arabia and those areas of the world. Quite a high prevalence there, and it spreads very differently. And part of those reasons is what Dr. Dan has talked about. I mentioned just in passing that the reason why they think it was huge in Africa is because malaria was dominant there. So the S gene selectively stayed back there and became permanent. It's not related to in terms of how the people get married. That's a different topic. There's a theory behind why it sat there. In the West, there's a counterpart for it here. They've got what they call, we're doing this podcast in the West and people may be interested, hereditary spherocytosis. Just like our sicklers, they also have slightly yellowed eyes. Very big spleens, one of the organs in the tummy is the counterpart they've got. So for us, it's sickle cell. For them, they've got a different condition because malaria is not a dominant feature here. That's for those who believe that theory of balanced polymorphism. That's different. So now coming to the social aspects of it. I suppose the initial thing I was going to talk about was the physical aspect. Then I'll talk a bit about the psychosocial.
Can you start from the physical aspect?
The physical aspect was so coming back to where we were at that spot, was talking about what are the day-to-day lives. What do these people go to? acute things are things that take them to a hospital. Oftentimes you see they are in and out of hospitals. And the reason is because of three things. One, those vessels, those bloods are sickled, they are bent. As they go through the blood vessels, they can obstruct readily when they get the right condition. And what are those right conditions? The weather is not right. Extreme hot, extremely cold, extreme stress, anything that makes the blood vessel not the right environment, they suffer for it. An infection, a viral infection, which is fairly common in this part of the world. In Africa, things like malaria, that's very day-to-day issues. Anything that causes a perturbation, a disturbance in the normal milieu of the blood vessel, set them off into a crisis. So the word you tend to hear is crisis that gets them into hospital. The crises are typically three things. One, the VOC is the term we say when they walk into a hospital. We call it vaso-occlusive, means the vessels are blocked, they are occluded. But for the patient, that's big grammar. The patient is having a painful crisis. And for some patients, that's almost a daily affair. A lot of missed school attendance, missed opportunities at work. So that's also playing a bit into the psychosocial aspect. So vaso-occlusive crisis. How frequent are they that determines for us as medics, what do we need to do? Does this young person or a young child or another person need something else? Like Dr. Dan has alluded to. Do they have them at all every year? Maybe not. So it depends on the severity. There are many factors that cause it's a moving part. The reason is what he has already alluded to correctly. There are a number of hemoglobin types that sits across. S is the one we're talking about. But there's another one called F. That one loves oxygen. It loves holding on to oxygen. So if you got enough of that F, you may be okay. You may have sickle cell, but you'll be compensating a bit. There are many other reasons why people are not in and out of hospitals that you could see when you do their blood testing, but that's a different matter. But the key things are vaso-occlusion, painful crisis. The second thing is you become very anemic. I've already said before that their steady state is different from me and you. If their steady state drop further, our normal hemoglobin, our blood level, as Doc has mentioned, is about 120. Theirs will sit about 80 to 90. What if that drops to 60? You can't function when your blood level is at 60. You basically can't walk to work every day. So they can have an anemic crisis. Viruses can make it worse. That's the second thing. But the younger ones, they have something they call sequestration. It brings them into hospital. What happens here is quite interesting. The blood pools and hides in the two big organs in the tummy, which is the spleen on the left and the liver, for most of us that know these terms, on the right. So you see a young child. When I walked in Ibadan, I trained also in Benin, you can get the parents to feel the tummy. Say, oh God, I can feel that swelling there. That's the spleen that have grown and enlarged and collected all the blood. So the child is totally pale. Why the spleen appears rich, full of blood, but that child is pale, they can't function. The child is almost paper white. And if you don't have an expert managing that child, they could push in so much blood to transfuse. Those blood stuck in the spleen will come back eventually. So you have double blood volume and the child can't cope with that blood volume. So it takes a bit of expertise to manage them in a proper center. So the three big things are that they come into: painful crisis, anemic crisis, sequestration crisis, or an infection. But the long-term things we are saying is the chronic things that we don't see. What about the unseen things? Those obstructions to the blood flow affect every other organ as well. It's just to really paint this. I know I'm painting this in a tough light for people listening, but it also takes the point that Dr. Dan was saying about two consenting adults and how do we prevent this, which we are really going to stress on subsequently. So all the organs in the body, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, even the reproductive organs, the ovaries, the testes, they also suffer those obstruction to the flow of vessels. You need blood flow to cope. So imagine that you're not seeing the heart have a painful crisis. The heart's also in pain. So over time, that heart grows to compensate for the anemia. Okay? It keeps pumping. So when a young person reaches 25, 30, they already have a dilated heart. Their heart is bigger than usual. The lungs already suffer from what they call pulmonary hypertension. I know this jargon, but it's an important jargon. It means that they struggle to keep enough oxygen down. That may be a reason to do something for them. The ones we don't talk about are things like the reproductive organs. A young person with sickle cell, for example, a boy, has a lot of psychosocial aspect to them. Sometimes they have priapism. I know this is a new word for most people listening, but it means an unwanted, prolonged erection. It just happens. They wake up in the morning and they have prolonged periods of erection and they're embarrassed to talk about it. These young people need a lot of care and support, so they need a loving team member to talk to, otherwise they suffer. It's already an indicator that their organ system is not working right. They just have a prolonged period, and you know when there's a prolonged erection not controlled, that could cause a lot of damage to those organs and their fertility could be gone. So we need to talk to them in a sensitive manner, and that could occur every day, briefly. and then goes into a prolonged phase where they actually need help. Sometimes we need to take out their sickle blood and give them A blood quickly when that happens. It may look like something that people could make fun of, but that could be deleterious for that patient with a reproductive lifestyle. So the chronic aspects are not seen as key as the ones that take them in day to day. The day-to-day things are, I look more jaundiced than usual. I look more yellow-eyed. My blood level is low. I'm in painful crisis. The hallmark, as we know, is pain. Unfortunately, the word sickle has gone with pain. If you come to the UK here, you've talked again about psychosocial aspect. There's a bit of worry about these children, these adults being let down. The All-Party Parliamentary Group in 2021 released a report, which I will advise all our listeners. It's out there on YouTube. It's out there in the community. It's called No One is Listening. It's a very key report, and that is because of the death of a child in Middlesex, of a young person in Middlesex in 2019. And the feeling was that maybe their pain was underestimated. Maybe their visit to the hospital to get medication for intense pain was described as drug seeking. Maybe you are abusing medications. But these are people who live a life of pain. So pain is not something you could judge in the context of, you are not in pain. A patient has once told me that when the pain of sickle comes, that was a young female that was talking. It's like second stage of labor. When the baby is about to come, continually. Even for our women listening on this podcast, nobody wants to be in that situation for one day. Even women that experience that for 20 minutes when the child is about to come, they know how intense that could be. But continually living that way is intense. So that's why the All-Party Parliamentary Group in the UK, for example, looked at that report and released it. And it's out there for people to listen to. There's an audio aspect to it as well that highlights the failings that people with sickle cell have had to go through. The stigma of saying, I'm back to the hospital next week. They don't even want to come. So when I see young people, older people coming with sickle cell related complication, you have to take it double serious. Because these are people who are used to living that way every day. Saying, I want to step in, it means they are not having control anymore. So we need to really be up to it to care for their psychosocial aspect. It's critical. Yeah. There's a lot of lost job opportunities. There's a lot of other aspects that may not function as well. I hope that helps, but I'm sure there'll be a lot.
It does. And, I don't know. I don't know what to add again, but you would agree with me that this episode is mind-blowing, I would say, because we are learning a lot. We are not just learning from the news or from the books or from the YouTube, but you are learning from professionals who deal with this situation day in, day out. So sit right back. Remember, it is important to follow our page, like our page, invite others to follow what we do here. Don't forget to send us your comment, because I know with the kind of terminologies that has been used here, there will be questions arising. Do well, be free. Send us your question in the comment section, and I can assure you, Doc would come back anytime to address those questions, and we can send it and get reply. You can even contact you directly and give you that feedback that you require. Doc, I want to ask, now, you made mention of places like Nigeria. It may interest us to know that record has it that Nigeria has the highest prevalence of sickle cell disease in the world. I want to know how much of here in terms of health facilities are there in Nigeria based on your experience. I know it's been a while ago, but based on your experience, what is the level of care? What are the level of facilities that are there to support this condition in Nigeria?
Absolutely critical question. There's no doubt. I do hope this podcast goes beyond just the viewers and to those that make decisions for the health system. There's no doubt we won't, hide behind anything to say there's a lot of issues in the health sector for developing countries like Nigeria. So that also reflects on the quality of care that these patients receive. That's not because the doctors or the nurses and the people don't have the best interest of the patient. It's just because they are working in a restricted repertoire. The things available to work with are low. Look at the nature of the problems these patients will have. One, they need proper hydration. In terms of preventing their problems, you need to be hydrated because you have blood vessels that are very busy trying to get obstructed. So you need fluid to run through them. So things like basic hydration will be key. Even when they come to the hospital and they do have a pain crisis, what we tend to do is to put something in their arm like a tube in to give what they call a cannula and then run a lot of drips because you want to unblock those vessels. You allow them drink and do that as well. You need access to things like that. The other common things I've said is anemic crisis. You need a proper functioning blood bank. You need a system where people are always willing to donate, always thinking about their next person, always waiting for that person who may come needing help. So you need a functional, there are many factors that affect what they get beyond just the structure itself. So you need a functional blood bank. You need to put to type. You don't want to give an S blood to it. You want it to be typed as AA because you want them to have a good amount of oxygen carrying capacity. So you need a system that is there to be ready for them when they come for their acute complications. You need specialist services as well. We don't have enough of them. Unfortunately, the brain drain has done a number on us in Nigeria or across Africa and other parts of the world. So you do need specialist people to look at them, people interested in that field of hematology, or people with an interest in sickle cell, because we have a huge population of those patients. Because if they are mismanaged, they tend to suffer even more as well. I've not even mentioned chronic things they could have, like stroke, because we're talking about blocked vessels in areas like the limbs that causes pain. What about sensitive vessels in the head? I've had patients that are walking through a bad and UCH in the emergency room, unable to move a right arm or leg because they've got a stroke from sickle cell. And immediately we'll put a cannula in the arm, taking out the sickle cell, try and give normal blood on the other side. So these are things that here in the West, they are automated. There's a machine to deliver that, to call what they call an exchange blood transfusion, meaning transiently, they're not going to make the patient sickle cell anymore. They're going to take away all the sickle cells and give them AA blood. And then for that time, the stroke at least can revert itself as much as you could. So you do need people to think outside the box and not just treat them routinely like another patient with stroke. So you need expertise. I cannot sit here and say we've got all that expertise. We need preventive expertise as well. One of the things we do for people with sickle cell is to look at the blood flow through the vessels in the brain. So we do that to see how fast is it. If it passes a certain number, they will need a drug to prevent stroke coming in. So you need a lot. You need neurology involved. You need not just hematologists. You need the general teams to work. So you say that we failed this group of patients. There's no doubt. The prevention is another different topic. But in front of us are thousands of patients that need our help. I do agree that we don't need to be seeing young people coming through the door with sickle cell in the year 2025. That can be a topic we discuss. But we need a health service that is ready to receive them. The current health service is not sufficiently robust enough to do that. And it's a reflection of the general issues as well in the society.
Well, I could imagine that even when presidents are going to London or France to get medical treatment, and even when clinics like the Aso Rock Villa get billions upon billions of naira in allocation on the national budget, but we still don't have these facilities to even treat our presidents in Nigeria, then talk of our young people or adults who are sufferers of this critical condition. I think something needs to be done. And I hope, like you said, I hope it's not only for our viewers or our subscribers. If you have a way to make this particular episode get to the president of Nigeria, the president of Ghana, the president of Saudi Arabia, wherever you are, pass this communication to them. Something needs to be done. This is, I think it's worse than pandemic with the level we are seeing it, and something needs to be done. People need to be looked after. Facilities needs to be provided. Professionals needs to be trained so that we'll get this correctly. Now, Doc, I want to come back to you again. What is the hope?
It's such a lovely question, isn't it? Where there is no, as I tell patients every day, even patients with cancers, when I finish telling them about the prognosis, I don't think we can treat this. I think the chances are very low. The chances are, I'll probably say is 60 or 70%. But I always tell them, hold on to that 60. You cannot, if you walk out of this room and you're holding on to the 40 where it will not work, then there's no point coming tomorrow. So we need to hold on to hope. And clearly there's hope. It's all, at the end of the day, it comes to a will. Where there is a will, there is a way, as our people will say. If there's a will to say, let's be preventive. Every young person you've spoken to, I'm checking my loved partner. I'm thinking, is this AS? Am I AS? Should I be shutting this down early on so that we don't have new young ones running through the street with sickle cell We should cut back that. But the failings will be for those who are already here. We cannot fail them. We need to find a better way. There's clearly hope. We cannot do without hope, but that hope needs, even for those who are Christians who say faith without work is dead. You need a bit of works to go with that hope. We need to put our money where our mouth is. The current head budget, I can't remember the numbers, but given our total budgets, the numbers going to health is not good enough. That has to be boosted. And I know the UN regulation or WHO will say 10% should go to health. I think it's probably sitting around 3 or 5. Don't quote me on that, but that should be boosted. You need a lot of health facilities built. You need to incentivize those who work there, the nurses and doctors who are all living in their droves, to stay back and try to deliver care. Because without this group of people to run the country, eventually we are running on with our hand held back, essentially, when you don't have it goes beyond just sickle cell. People with other basic conditions need our help. So you need to really look into the health sector to build it. First, preventive, clearly we'll come to that. So we need to look at the churches, the mosques, the imams, everybody talking about this. Don't get two people wedded. Lovely wedded wife or husband should be, where's your genotypes? Can we deal with this first? Because you are preventing the future, but that's a different matter. But I'm saying beyond, for those who are affected, there's help out there, but how do we get it to them? And I'll tell you why. Now in 2025, where we are, this is the time of information age. If a young person, for example, walk through the door with sickle, unfortunate as it is, I do still see people who are coming in 8-9 months of age. The first sign is often swelling of the hands and feet. And people say, oh, I thought my genotype was, I see that discussion every time. But that's always the first sign in children that are infants. The reason why they are so well in the first year is because they are running with their maternal numbers. As the maternal blood goes off fully and the child features come, then the symptoms start. Some children are well, so they are 2 or 3. Parents say they are totally well. This is a surprise. But the surprise shouldn't be there. The surprise should be pre the wedding or pre the discussions. That's a different topic. So what do we do for that child? There's hope. The first thing we give, there's a drug now that is common knowledge. It's called hydroxycarbamide. I know it's a term we're using here, but it's a standard of care now. I know all the studies that were done were in the US and in the UK, but they are now come to stay. Even in Ibadan, when I worked there, every child at the age of 9 months to 1 year should start hydroxycarbamide. This should not even be a question of waiting for you to know if the child will be having pain or not. Don't wait. And the reason I say don't wait, and I'm saying it clearly here, is because you don't wait for pain. What about pain in the organs you cannot see? That amount of obstruction going on to cause pain is also going on in critical organs that do not manifest as pain with the bones. So we give them hydroxycarbamide early on. Parents sit around saying, oh, maybe I don't need it. What about side effect? The bigger side effect is a shortened life expectancy. Most of these people will live to about 40 to 50. Now it's pushed to up to 60. But that's not the life expectancy all of us pray for every day. We want to be hundreds, people say, or 90s.
Grandparents.
They also want to see their grandchildren. Yeah. We owe them a responsibility. The parents who now have affected or sufferers, a responsibility to the healthcare system to take the advice that's given. So there's a drug to prevent them coming in and out of hospital. That drug has really made a big change in the last 10 to, even while I worked in Nigeria, for the frequency of admissions. So we don't tend to see a lot of people in the hospital anymore. We just monitor the blood levels and see, because the drug has monitoring needed. So that's one. For those who are very much affected, that comes to what doctor said, who are coming, despite your best care, they're coming every day or every week with a painful crisis. One of the worst crises that young people always go off for is what they call acute chest syndrome. Because this crisis is not happening in the lung bones with pain, it's happening in the chest. That means your oxygen level will drop. And then we need urgent care, then we need intensive care. Immediately we've identified that group. That is a group that will probably need stem cell transplantation. You need to make them AA compulsorily. You need to make them AS. Change them from SS. And that's not going to happen just in... It could happen. Miracles are there, no doubt. I'm a man of faith as well. But the key thing here is science has been given for a reason. They attempt to disconnect it from faith is actually wrong. It is a God-given skill that we're all sitting here with and learned. So stem cell transplantation is an option, but we don't have the capacity enough. We need a good functioning blood bank to deliver that. The average cost for stem cell transplantation, if you were to be quoted, if you're coming from Kuwait or Nigeria to the UK to do it, we're talking £100,000 roughly. Yeah, so that is not a number that you can bandy to the person who is earning 30,000 naira a month or 15 pounds. Yeah. So the prevention still becomes the most critical thing. Yeah. So, but for you to build enough capacity to deliver a stem cell service, in a cheaper fashion in Nigeria, it will take a while. People have tried. We've got a team in UBTH who've tried to deliver stem cells, and they've struggled as well with the challenges that come with it. I can't sit here and beat my chest and say we've got a functional stem cell transplant center.
So does it have to do with lack of facilities?
Did they succeed in it? I mean, I don't know how good in Nigeria this stuff. I mean, did they? I've never asked to know much because I know most stem cells was really in the western part of the world, but have they succeeded in
Yes. From the little I know, from the particular team there in UBTH where I trained, who tried even today, I understand, to continue pressure.
Okay,
they've had good success. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean it couldn't fail. It doesn't mean that the grafts that you give the patient, the new cells, you won't lose it sometimes. But without trying, you are looking at somebody with a shortened life expectancy. And so people see it
might likely succeed if they want. I know definitely, this bone marrow or stem cell, they transplant themselves. It depends on how it works. I know another one we've not talked this. We also do gene editing. It's another technique, but everything is very expensive.
Gene editing is different from
it's different
transplants.
It's different from that. It's different from that. That's maybe the angle I might need to talk about. When you talk about is there hope? Every hope it's still expensive. I mean, the cheapest is the one you talked about, giving the drug. That would be the hydroxycarbamide, I guess. Is it just to give the drug? What it does is to supply more oxygen to the body.
Yes, what it does is to come back to that thing I mentioned about why some people are not very unwell. It's because they've got another small fragment of the hemoglobin called F, which allows to hold on to oxygen. So eventually that drug pushes up the F to 10, 15%, makes them less sickly, and they stay out of hospital, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But long term, obviously, as you take a medication, nothing comes without a price. We need to think of an outlet that is more permanent, curative, and that comes to those points.
And if I go back to the gene editing stuff, you understand, in this particular case, what they do, there's this technique they call CRISPR-Cas9. You understand? That's very, very recent. In fact, it revolutionized the area of molecular genetics, and it's been applied. I think it was approved sometime in 2023. In February 2023, the UK has been using that gene editing software to cure sickle cell. So what it does is like the CRISPR means cluster regularly interspace short palindromic repeats. You understand? And it has an enzyme called Cas9. So what it does is like they actually look at that particular gene that actually codes for the sickle cell and probably cut it off. And probably if you have another supply, they will they'll delete that gene, you understand? They'll now reprogram it, probably synthetically, and probably put the right gene and transfer it back to the patient. And that particular stuff will eliminate the sickle cell gene itself. The technique is in use now, but like I said, it's very expensive.
Do you have an idea how much that will cost?
Anything DNA now, I mean, probably.
I could tell you, but
I honestly,
if you don't mind, I can jump.
You can jump in here, because I'm sure.
So that's a lot of prices bounded around. This is also another higher level of pricing. So that's why prevention is critical. Gene editing is good. The difference is, to put it in simple terms, is that for stem cell, you're looking for a sibling who doesn't have sickle cell. You're looking for an unrelated donor, and you're giving those cells so that the cells sit in the bone marrow and start to make new cells for the patient lifelong. So if functionally cured, there are some patients in my clinic who were transplanted across who are now here, or who were following up for years. They don't remember what sickle cell is, which is fantastic. Good. But in gene editing or gene addition, you are using the patient's own cells, taking it out and engineering it with that technology. I don't want to go back to the fine details of it, but it's it just tells you where science have gone on to. It's your patient's own cells, and you put it in there. You've edited and removed that area that was causing trouble. Actually fixed it, but you put a viral vector to it. Get it engineered, grown enough copies, and you reinfuse it to the patient. Sounds very easy, isn't it, and cheap? But that comes to the price of nearly £500,000 in pounds.
Nearly £500,000 in pounds.
Very expensive.
So you really meet in the NHS that works with a system of equity. If you have a patient there who can get their medicine for leg pain, and you are delivering a service for one patient for £500,000, for a system where you don't pay for and you pay in with your surcharges and everything else, you have to think what is equitable. So it took a lot of deliberation for that approval to come through initially for thalassemia. And now the approval is there for sickle cell disease. Our aim, even on the hospital where I work, is to start delivering it. We're just building the capacity now to set up training to deliver the service. But most importantly, we don't need loads of patients with this condition because it's a lifelong of so many complications. Those two options are there.
Prevention.
Prevention is key.
Prevention
It used to be what you describe as an orphan disease, meaning nobody was really interested. As you see, the disease is sitting in the Afro-Asian areas where the huge scientific research are not really happening. But we are grateful for the last 5 to 10 years when people have taken this on board. That brought the successes we are seeing with gene editing. And the cohorts of patients on that trial have done well. That's almost 3-4 years out. Some people have never gone back to the hospital. Some people are carrying high hemoglobin F level, almost like they are never sicklers. So that means you're almost getting to the point of a functional cure in that sense. But that comes with a lot of investments that are not going to happen overnight. They are not accessible to the hundreds of thousands of patients that are sitting across in Nigeria and Ghana. So they need other ways to think about them.
So the government in Nigeria and Ghana needs to think those SUVs, those money that are being allocated on security votes and pocketed, those money you put in Ghana must go to distribute during election. Those money could do somebody a very important favor by providing facilities that would support in the care and prevention of this condition. So it's important we take note of this. And whoever that is coming to campaign for you, because all these things takes policy to happen, and it takes political will for somebody to implement this thing. And I think it's important that whoever that is coming to campaign for you, they need to take note of this important aspect of our health, because it's very, very critical. Dan, do you have something to add as we begin to tidy up? I want you to react to the issue of this. What Doc said earlier, the issue of Ogbanje, the issue of Abiku, and all that are usually linked to this condition.
Like I said before, sometimes it's ignorance, I guess, because you don't know it. I've seen situations where when people don't know the explanation of stuff that that science has explained, they just link it to the spirit world or spiritism or any other thing. They just use that to explain it. It's always very prevalent in Africa, you understand? But all these things have scientific explanation. Even everyone used to see diseases most times, in probably people have, everything is caused by pathogen. They used to think, probably there is bacteria, fungi, or viruses and all that. But this has nothing to do with those pathogens themselves. It's something that's genetically inherited, and it takes a high level of knowledge or skills to be able to diagnose this stuff and be able to detect them, you understand? And you just imagine where people that die through this stuff, they didn't know. I'm talking about Africa, for instance, or let me just talk about Nigeria, for instance, where this thing is very high. You understand? People who died from that. Now they now have the knowledge and they see this is where it is. You understand? That idea of saying this thing is in Ogbanje or anything, no one is going to buy that idea again. So that's what I used to think is just on the part of ignorance. But it's, like the sickle cell gene, I like in support of what doctor said, it has the sickle cell gene actually helped a bit in Africa, not just the sickler. It's the S gene, the hemoglobin S. Regarding the one he talked about malaria. There's this stuff about people talk about people who are normal have high prevalence of malaria than people who are carriers, and they've been documented, and these things have been well explained, because you can see people who are carriers of this don't actually suffer a lot from malaria. And the reason is because the environment. Someone who's a carrier also has part of that sickle cell gene in it, and these cells don't last and they can die off. It doesn't give you an enabling environment and oxidation on its own. But you see this Plasmodium falciparum that causes malaria, which is a protozoa, it actually sits well and has an enabling environment in someone who is normal.
No,
Even in Nigeria.
malaria show me shege for Nigeria.
Are you AA?
I'm AA.
Oh,
It didn't show me pepper.
Definitely, yeah, because once it gets into you, your blood enriches it with all the oxygen and all the stuff. So it has, but unlike someone who's either a carrier or sick, probably he doesn't have that environment. So it's a bit hostile to it. So that is the only little stuff that actually made it more on the angle that the African part. This is the only little advantage he had, but this, but definitely should, no matter with this knowledge you have, I think the awareness should be people should try as much as possible to avoid people who have, especially carriers, not able to get married, so they don't have dominant, dominant gene for that sickle cell itself. So that's just one thing. Selective mating should be applied. Like I said before, love is no longer blind. Before you marry, just go for your sickle cell genotype test to prevent it. All this stuff are calling gene editing stem cell. I don't think how many people can afford it in Africa. And even in Nigeria itself, we deal with the poor healthcare. Even some people, even the drug itself, not everyone can afford. I'm sure government may have subsidized it, I guess.
And I believe because they could not afford the medical attention, they will end up to pastors like Odumeje, who will use WrestleMania to wrestle out the sickle cell, or Pastor Jeremiah, who will sell you heavenly water or heavenly handkerchief to wipe off the sickle cell, believing that those things do work. Meanwhile, we need professionals that will do great job in getting this sorted. Doc, do you have final word before we conclude?
I'll just say it's a beauty to be here, because this is a topic that is dear to me, clearly, as you've seen about Dan as well. There's a lot we can do as humans sitting back at home to prevent this being an issue. The big thing I always see from parents when they come in and there's a bit of angst between mother and father, they were not sure that this child was going to be sickle, is that, I did my test and they told me I was AA. But my wife clearly told me I'm AS, she's AS, so we thought we were doing it right. Do it in two places. Don't do it in more than. If you think you are thinking of the health of your child for the next 50 to 100 years, do it in two places. Get a corroboration. If you think you've struggled in a center in Nigeria, in Ghana, and the result is not right, let's prevent this. For those where there is already established sickle cell, there's help out there. The government can help us get better, but there's a lot of options. Don't sit back. Don't suffer in silence. There's a lot of help. And that goes just beyond medicine. It also needs a lot of psychological support as well. But I do hope everyone listens, rather than no one is listening, which was the outcome of the all-party parliamentary group report.
Thank you, Doc. It's important everyone listens, and that is why we are here, and we believe that you have listened today and you have taken note of important points that have been highlighted. And I would always encourage you, anything you find confusing, send us comment in the comment section, and we will come back to you with full analysis of that particular term or jargon that maybe you struggle to understand. We have experts that will do the job for us in-house. And on that note, I want to say thank you for this very, very specialist team who have done quite in-depth analysis of this condition today. I want to say thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. And thank you again for being part of this episode, and we'll encourage you to always join us in our weekly episodes. We'll continue to bring you intriguing, educative, and things that will benefit you in all spheres of life. Remember to follow us, subscribe to our pages, like our pages, and send us your comments. We are watching those comments, and there will be rewards for those that are engaging in our page. I don't want to say it now, but you'll find out soon. See you next time.